Mate, I'm gathering that the cornerstone of your life has been blues guitar music. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's, pretty much it. I mean, I played lots of different styles of stuff.
Yeah,
Mostly as a filling. Left to my own devices, mate, it's blues, yeah, blues rock.
yeah, yeah. I'm talking to Ross Watercourse, and Ross, legend down the Sydney scene, and been playing a long time down there. Now sort of came to his senses and moved up north of the border and got his visa and everything, and has been hanging around Brisbane town doing some recording and everything else. But I wonder, just wanted to catch up with Ross and talk about him because he was, mate. You were down in the whole Sydney scene when it was really, really sort of super pumping. Like, I remember we'd go down and do tours down Sydney, and you play at the Cross and all that, and it was scary, mate. We had the Valley, but it was nothing like playing in the Cross. But it was such a vibrant music scene. Yeah, I'm talking about the '80s, probably late '70s, '80s,
Yep.
early '90s,
Yep.
and you were at the heart of all that, weren't you?
Well, I was lucky, I guess, to grow up in the era I grew up in, Nick. I mean, I tell the story all the time. In 1981, I walked into our agent's office and begged them to give us Tuesday night off. Right? We had that much work, and some of the guys were married, and it wasn't going down well, you know. So, yeah, we worked a lot, but we're talking pre-web, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there's now it's like, BC and AC. I just go, a lot of stuff that was, it was a social movement. A lot of music was a social movement. Like you could go to a place on a Wednesday night, see a lot of the same people the next night, see them at the Life's Over on the Friday night, you see them right. So, we hung our hats on live music. It was our social movement, and we don't have that anymore. It's the audiences I find now. The gigs for what I do are kind of getting smaller.
yeah.
The festival market's great, but if you don't get onto the festivals, you won't be selling much product. So,
Well, the problem with the festivals is that that you hear governments putting money into this festival, that festival, but it still only makes employment for maybe at a festival 20 artists, and you're going to find 10 of those are going to be A-listers or international. Then you got kind of B-listers, and then your local artists, you probably got employment for about 6 people, and then the rest is going into insurance companies and to food stalls and those things. And I get that side of it. But I get sick when they pretend they're helping the local music industry out by investing in festivals, because they might be helping the local economy out, which is good. But don't
yep,
dress it up as helping local musicians out, because it's not doing that.
sure. Look, I'm with you there, Nick. I won't mention the name of the arts minister. He was in the previous government. He put a lot of money into ballet.
Yep.
And I go, because that's what he liked. And I went, yeah, but ballet is really an Australian Indigenous style. And you and I have talked about the grassroots thing before, and it's harder now than it ever was. Like, what covers do you play? Well, the band doesn't play any covers,
Yeah.
right? We might do a Stevie Ray Vaughan tune, or we might do a Hendrix tune, but basically the repertoire is built on original music. So, we just did the Wall by Stomp up there near Gympie, and that was good, man. Small regional festival, 250 people, capped at 250. Camped out for 3 days. Lovely setting, the old hall, and
Yep.
he had, a lot of interstate artists, so he must have had a reasonable budget,
Yep.
to put those gigs on. And it was, very well attended. But again, only a small regional festival. So if you want to go like Byron, Broadbeach, those bigger festivals, you will sell a lot of product, but you got to have the product there to sell.
Okay, mate, but we can talk later about the challenges for our industry now, and I've talked like that a lot to different people, but I also feel a bit like talking about the glory days, about the fun we had, and mate. So going back to your roots, so mate, if we just give people a bit of a rundown on your quick story, but I'll just say, you're legendary blues guitarist in the New South Wales, Sydney area. Your family members were in various different bands around the place, correct? And how did you? So, expand on that story, but tell us how you got from being, a young whippersnapper to being a great blues guitarist, mate. What was that journey about?
Well, yeah, that was it was in two parts really. My older brother was a great musician. He was in a couple of big bands, late 60s, early 70s, and I was allowed to leave school early because I'd simply stopped going.
Which bands was he in? Which bands?
He was in the Flying Circus. He was in Black Feather. He was in Flake, right? People from that era will remember those bands.
Yeah, well, Black Feather, were they bopping the blues?
Yeah. He was in that lineup of that. And interestingly enough, there's actually no bass on that. It's just kick drum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were going for something quirky. They got it. So, and he got me a gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go, right at the heart of the American R&R at the Cross.
Yeah, right.
Those were the days. I mean, so that band worked 6 nights a week from 8 p.m. till 3 a.m. 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off across those hours. So I don't know, the guys I was playing with must have tolerated me. So I kind of learned on the job. And he would come in from tours, set exercises for me. So I kept trying to keep my theory up because we had to back artists. You could be playing at Sutherland Police Boys Club and Ronnie Burns turns up with charts. You got to be able to read those to be able to back them, right? That doesn't happen anymore. But
no.
So, and then when I was 50, I kind of hit a brick wall with my playing. I just felt like I wasn't getting any better. And there was a guy that I was playing in a band with called Jim Kelly, who doesn't play guitar like anybody else I've ever met. And I said to him, Jim, do you do private lessons? And he said, no, you'll have to come out and do the course. He was thinking that I wouldn't. So I did. Yeah, they put me straight into second year. So that was a real steep learning curve. And even then, I'll be 72 next May, so I'm going back a few years to when I was at uni, and even further back earlier than that. So that's how I more or less started. And I always loved the blues. I heard, we used to watch these bands at Ashfield Town Hall when I was about 12, and one of them was doing Hey Joe, right? And we went, well, who's that by? And he said, it's this guy, Jimi Hendrix. So I immediately went up to the local record store and bought the RU Experience album that had Red House Blues on it. Mm-hmm. And I heard that, and I saw, that's what I want to do. And there was no way I could actually pull off what Hendrix was doing. I used to get a 10-cent piece and put it on the arm of the record player to slow the record player down enough so I could work the stuff out or close. And then I'd take the 10-cent coin off, and of course it's in a different key, so you got to learn it all over again.
Yeah.
But they were the, learning methods back then. So, I had a Mel Bay.
You mean you couldn't put the YouTube video on and get them to slow it down so they could check you out?
Nah, but with all the nice camera angles that they had. So that's the thing. The educational opportunities now for young musicians, mostly because of YouTube, are better than they've ever been. Right? But they have.
How much older was your brother than you?
He's 4 years older than that.
So how much?
4.
So he probably, you had him as a mentor to pick up pieces off, I imagine. How did he learn what he was doing?
Mate, he was a borderline genius. He came second in the state the year he sat for the HSC.
Right.
We had a piano in the house, so he took up the bass guitar when he was about 17 or 18, and then just the Flying Circus's roadie lived over the road from us. So he left school, finished his HSC. Parents said, "Oh, we'll give him a gap year so he can go and play in the band." Right?
Yeah.
And that was as far as it went, you know. So he had very much self-taught his stuff. He was showing me triads on the piano.
Yeah.
You know, so I realised the triad wasn't a Chinese street gang. You know,
Yeah.
it was actually a musical thing. And so again, that's a lesson I've carried with me right through, because on the guitar, when you play, you know, a standard garden variety bar chord, you've got 3 octaves there,
Mhm.
right? You don't need them. You only need the first, the third, and the fifth, or the first, the minor, third, and the fifth, to start revoicing your chords. So, yeah. Anyway, that's for a lot of my theory.
I had when I first started doing these interviews, and I probably need to put it up again. I did an early one with Keith Kerwin. Did you ever know Stretch at all from the Foster Brothers?
Yeah.
I did an interview with Keith, and he's been a mate for a long time. But we were talking about, he was saying how back in his day, you'd get whatever book you could get your hands on to learn something from. You'd do like you're saying about, you try and slow things down on the record player. And he said you'd pick up little things people would say. Like, I think he said all the strings that could get were just too big, thick, that they couldn't bend them. And he found out something about, you could get banjo strings from somewhere that could actually thinner, and you could bend them. And all these little things you found out back then, which it was like, I'm listening to an audio book at the moment about the Eureka Stockade, and about how the founding of gold, finding gold in Australia, and what happened in those things, and the way these guys were literally discovering, how to do things as they went along. And it seems to me that era of probably the mid 60s to early 70s in Australian music was like the equivalent to the Diggers at Eureka. It's like the guys then were actually figuring out how we did this stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you've only got to look at the amount of Australian amplifier companies that used to be around.
Really?
There was Overeem, Strauss, Wasp, Phoenix. Like, I could remember 7 or 8 major brands, Leonard, of amplifiers that were made in Australia, because the demand was such that, I don't know whether it was too hard to get imports. We hadn't figured out how to convert them yet to our power supply. But yeah, so it was, and again, fits and starts, like sooner or later, you'd have to change your valves in your amplifier. Right? So you had to figure out how to do that, and it was the same with learning to play guitar. Someone would go, Hank B. Marvin does this, right? And we had this rule in our neighbourhood that you couldn't play lead guitar till you learned to play rhythm guitar first.
Right.
That was just some stupid rule that we had. And I used to think to myself, geez, Hank B. Marvin must have been one hell of a rhythm guitar player. So you don't have to play any chords anymore. BB King was the same. You might have seen that U2 clip of When Love Comes to Town.
Yep.
And he walks in the dressing room and went, Edge will show you the chords. And he goes, I don't play no chords. I don't play no chords.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was, but with us in this country, it was a little bit different. You had to be a bit of an all-rounder, I mean, mate, I was Ronnie Burt's personal guitarist for a 3-week season at Coogee Shipping when I was 16.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because I backed him in the band, and, at all gigs he done. And so, yeah, they gave me a white leather jacket for probably a personal wardrobe, which I have back at the end of the gig. That's the band that were backing him at the Oceanic didn't have a guitar player. I can imagine that. So they had a horn section, bass, drums, piano, and they all wore these sequins, spankly waistcoat things with black shirts. with the little ties, right? I turned up with head to here and a stack, right? And the band would just had a kit. But of course I was Ronnie's personal guitarist. They just had to wear me. And I only had to play Ronnie's set, which was maybe, he might have done 35 or 40 minutes. That was it,
Yeah.
Good gig. Was a good gig to land,
And people don't realize too that at that stage we'd really just come out of the big band phase too, where guitar was actually had acoustic guitar in the big bands, which were really percussion, part of the percussions. They weren't like featuring in any solos or whatever. And you have that transition going from that big band sound to rock appearing, and suddenly guitars dominating and taking that whole feel along with it. While people were still dressing up like they were in the big band,
I mean, with again the Shadows, I loved the Shadows, but then when the Beatles came along and they had the vocals and the guitars go on, right? And I don't know if it might have been Paul McCartney. You look at their early songs, and some of those chord progressions are quite complex.
Yep.
That they weren't just banging out 3 chords on every song, so. Someone in that band had an amazing knowledge, but that thing about 2 guitars, right? You no longer needed horns, you didn't need keyboards, 2 guitars, bass and drums, and you could run the world,
And I think the great big, I wasn't there obviously at the time the Beatles sort of came through, but what I've always been amazed was the way that his bass work, Paul McCartney's bass work, would actually be working off notes off the root of the chords and create extra layers, which really went on to become such a major part of rock music, and the flavor of music. So were they, like, when you first heard them, was the influence as big as what the legend says it was?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
That was absolute. Apart from the fact that it swept the world, right? The whole British invasion that it grew into took over the planet, mate. I get when I first heard "She Loves You," see, you would know yourself as a musician, you're not hearing the music the same way as someone who doesn't play.
Yep.
I'm sitting there listening to a piece of music, even back there, analysing what the chord structure might be, working out what mode he might have got actually for his guitar solo. What guitar did he use to get that tone? All that stuff. So the lyrics for me up until 12 months ago became like a very poor last. Like, great lyrics, but it's the guitar work or it's the bass work,
Yep.
Interesting. You're mentioning Paul McCartney's bass work because they asked him how he got the bass to stand out. Because, like when they started recording, mate, it was one mic. It was They didn't even have 2 tracks, so it was one mic placed in the middle of the room. I always gave credit to the Americans for being able to get the bass up front in their recordings, whereas it was always deep. Anyway, they said to Paul McCartney, "How did you get your bass to stand out? That iconic bass line, that He said, "I was sloppy out of tune. That's what it stands out."
Yeah, right. Well, there's something that Chuck Berry, his guitar, he always had slightly out of tune too. And I remember hearing a story, I think it's real, where the guys from the Angels were backing him in an early stage, and that his guitar was backstage, and they sort of respectfully just tuned up his guitar backstage, and he ripped into him because they kind of just tuned it slightly wrong, that he actually played it slightly out of tune. I don't know if that's true or not, but is that true with Chuck Berry? Do you know that story about his guitar being out of tune?
I don't know. Have you ever seen the film clip of him and Keith Richards together in the studio?
No.
Chuck did come across like he could have been a very difficult man. My friend Greg Hansen, the drummer, back then, and said they were in the dressing room, really like nervous, the 4 guys that were back in. And this guy, huge guy in a suit, comes in, big black guy, and says, "Good band, yes. Mr. Berry will be along to see you shortly." And Chuck walks in and he goes, who's the drummer boy? Who's my drummer boy, right? Greg goes, wait a spirit. He goes, okay, you watch my left leg. If I stop, you stop. If I start, you start. And that was like the rehearsal before the Chuck Berry show. So I'm not surprised if his guitar was slightly out of tune. I think when I listen back, a lot of stuff, the guitars were terribly out of tune, mate. Of course, we didn't have electronic tuners. You had a pitchfork, an 0440 pitchfork.
Yeah.
And you start tuned your A string to it, then hope the rest were in.
When we lived in Los Angeles, there were like hundreds of radio stations you could tune to, and there were just so many different interesting little things that come up. I remember we were driving once from San Diego up to LA, and we had the radio on, and there was some dude doing a show about listening to Beatles songs like through the left channel or the right channel, just like listening to that. And when they'd play it through one channel, you'd actually hear like them talking between lines and all these other little mistakes coming in, all these things that it just went to show out of this great music, it wasn't perfection.
Sure.
It was a lot of imperfection in there, but made something that was so rich and unique. And I think we've lost a little bit of that to a degree in a lot of production these days where everything's so finite. But at the same time, you can sing raw into a iPhone and get a much better recording than you could ever get from a microphone into a tape track back in those days. So it's give and take, But mate, when you're talking about listening to the bass and the different things, or you'd be listening to a recording and trying to work out what mode was being played over what solo, I had the totally opposite background. I grew up listening to I was fascinated by singer-songwriters, James Taylor, Jackson Browne, Stephen Stills. Not so much Stills, he was a great guitarist. But guys who would do a lot of, I'm very competent with my finger picking. I'm kind of competent with my acoustic playing. But I'd always start mucking around with learning my scales, and I'd start trying to write a song. And I'd never really master my scales. I'd kind of get back to what I did. And it's always amazed me how lead guitarists work. And mate, to us unwashed out here, who've never sort of gone through the whole enlightened experience, when you're soloing away, whether it be blues or rock player, whatever, are you thinking modes? Are you thinking scales? Are you thinking triads? What are you thinking?
Yeah, okay. I base all my solos off the chords.
Okay.
So whatever the chord structure is, I will pretty much follow that around till I get something that's melodic. I try not to use scales of any sort in my solos. Having said that, I can hear what I used to run up part of it.
Are you using chord positionings in your really pulling apart chord positionings?
I'd say to people, look, let's say C minor. Learn here's 3 different inversions of C minor.
Yep.
Now, what are the notes in that C minor? And if you start to put them in some sort of semblance of order, it's going to sound pretty good. If you stay with, you'll find things where you can go outside, you can stretch a bit, you can bend a bit. So I'm looking for melody, but I'm thinking where the chord structure's going, and that's how I'll voice my solos.
And do you think of chord structuring in the sense of knowing those chords from that song, or do you do the natural thing where it's like 1, 4, 3, your positionings around those ways?
Now, look, writing's a different thing. I tend not to follow that 1, 4, 5 or 1, 4, 3 pat. I just find it does limit you in your expression, right? So me personally, mate, I look at the notes, right? Take a standard G chord, and I go, but the notes that you might have in a G7 or a G6, right? Or a G minor, or a G major 7, or a G9. All of those notes within that particular chord and all its variations are all available to you now as a soloist.
Right.
So you're going to find some nice stuff in there if you're hearing the melody in your head first.
Hey, quick commercial break. Big shout out to our sponsor for today's episode, which is me, Nick Phillips. Look, I've got to thank myself so much. I couldn't be doing the show without me. And if you get a chance, check out the sponsor's website, www.nickphillips.com. Check out my music, my videos, my bio, all that stuff, and maybe contact me and book me for a gig. That would be great. But thanks, Nick, for your sponsorship. Back to the show.
Right. We've just done a new EP, and again, that the way I think that's what came out. We wanted something that was really raw, that sounded like the band. All the other EPs or records I've done, and I had great success with them, but they were really well produced. To the point where I had to bring extra players in if I was going to do any of the stuff live. Whereas this time around, we just did it as a basic 3-piece live in the studio. So I've overdone the guitar solo, and that's all. Everything else is live, and it's kind of raw, and it seems to be working all right. So, and again, mate, coming back to how I voiced my solos off that, I wrote those songs, and then I looked at the chord structures, and I could throw that in for a solo section to make it stand out from the rest of the song. So the good solos to me are always the ones you can whistle as a separate part of the song.
Well, it was interesting. I saw I don't know if it's old or new, but I saw an interview with Clapton recently, and I always assumed he would be the master of, like, your modes and everything else going across the board. And he just said he just got to know the guitar well enough that he knew what he could hear it sing in his head, he could play on the guitar. Yeah. And it seems to me that's what you're saying a little bit by knowing those chord positionings, those structures. It's like hearing what you can sing in your head. And I think that's what I think some of the greatest solos were actually like some of the Beach Boys stuff, which were, or Eagles, which were the solos were as much as important part of the melody as anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Look at Hotel California, mate. Where would that song be without those iconic solos? So
yeah.
You're right. Yeah. And again, it comes back to what sounds good. Like, we used to have to do it direct to tape, and you couldn't overdub too much because the tape would start to stretch.
Yeah, right.
Right. Now with digital recording, you cut and paste till you pull with the face. And I have done that in the past. I've gone, edit that, keep that. Oh, I'm going to repair that one. It's like cut pastes, like pretty expedient now for guitar players. But again, before you go into the studio, look, I've played on 33 albums for other people as a second player.
Yep.
What I always did with those, and it comes back to what I do again, is I would turn up with 2 versions of everything they'd wanted me to learn and go, do you prefer this one or that one? Because you're getting paid to get in and get out in a hurry because they're paying hourly rates. So, or we could cut, paste, and do an amalgamation of the 2 different solos I've presented, But it's something I prefer to do, is I'll always, no musician ever walks out of the studio and goes, that was great. We all walk out of there and go, I could have done that so much better.
Yeah, although I do think there is a knack to knowing what you've done is good, and that you could do maybe 6 alternatives to that, but they would be equally as good. It's just that as moments that which moment are you going to capture? Because I think that's one of the things, so much time gets wasted in the studio where you've got a great take, you've got it sounding great, and then people say, I can do that better, but are they doing it better or are they just doing it different?
Yeah, well, that's it. Take out half the notes that I had by the time I was in my mid-30s, I had learned the less is more approach.
Yep.
Give it some space, let it breathe. It's you could stay in there all night perfecting a solo, and at the end of the day, you're probably the only one that's going to notice. Like, if it's your record, you have to like it, right? It has to suit the vibe of the song, serve the song, and not what you think you could do with it to be flash. Just go in and play the best solo you can find at that time for that particular song. So complement the track. Don't try it right over it. If it's a crappy song, you're never going to save it, mate. You can put the Sydney Symphony Orchestra on it. It's a dud tune, all right? Whereas a great tune will stand all sorts of versions. You can do it reggae, you can do it classical, you can do it right. It's a good song. There's no shortage of the ways you can do it. But if it's not a good song,
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, I think that is a blessing of today too. That there, I think there's been periods in the last probably 40 years where, it's felt like people have to sit in a certain genre to be in the market, whereas now you can strip things right back to an acoustic and the guitar through to as complex as, high tech techno rock is or orchestral music is. It's
Sure.
all bass, and a song can be taken and done in all those forms, like you're saying. And I think now more than ever before, it's an acceptable thing to do, and people actually will listen to songs in so many different forms, and you can find markets in so many things. Where back, maybe in the 80s, it had to be a Triple M format, or it had to be a ABC format, or it had to be this to be played. Now there's like, as hard as it is to get your music heard, there is a possibility that you are. Well, a really interesting thing I found when I was doing a lot of work in China was that German heavy metal music sold more in China than in Germany. And that was just sheer weight of numbers, the number of people there. And I spent some time over there with Andy Summers, the guitarist from The Police. And Andy he's a heavily involved in his photography, and we organised for him to be the feature of the Beijing Art Festival. And we hung out with him. It was such a pleasure. But there was one stage, we were taking him around this area, and he's Stanley Tung, and he's taking these photos, and there was this punk club in China, in Beijing, and there was this punk dude standing out there with his hair all done up, and Andy went to take his photo, and the punk guy goes, "Fuck off," and we were laughing, because if only the punk guy knew who he was talking to, the kind of one of the guys from that whole era. But just shows how our world musically, it's as hard as it is for us and we've got a lot of issues to deal with, it is so rich in so many other ways as well.
Sure. Look, and it's the same, mate. One thing has been the same all the way through. There's two types of music in the world. There's stuff you like and stuff you don't like.
Yeah.
Generally, the stuff you like, you have to go digging for it, and you always have to do that. I had my mate that I was fooling. He played bass, I played guitar. We were both really bad. We were about 14, and I'd go to his place on Friday nights. And we go through the credits on the record, right? And so the Beano album with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and that beautiful version of Hideaway that Eric Clapton did, right? And we've gone into Ashwood's record store the next day, where you could buy Swamp Cell albums. And we'd say to the guy, right, this instrumental is written by F. King. Who's F. King? And he'd pull out 2 or 3 Freddie King's albums. There you go, boys. Go on to listen to that. And we listened to an LEPB King record. And I said to my mate, "That's Eric Clapton." Right? So that's where Eric got so much of his stuff from. Those guys were accessible. So it was all influences, mate. But yeah, again, the opportunity to read the liner notes now is not existent, right? You get an album, mate, you take it home, you'd read it from cover to cover to see who played what. Oh yeah, I got him on this album playing with so and so and so and so. So it was like we were on a journey. We were going to uncover the truth of music that came back to those blues masters.
And it was a technology journey too. I don't know if it's true or not, but once again, I saw a post the other day where the first song that became a major hit using a distortion pedal was Brown Sugar, I think, from the Stones. But apparently there'd been distortion pedals before then, but it hadn't been used in major hit songs. But when I lived in Los Angeles, the guys we were recording with who owned Cherokee Studios, the Robb brothers, they had this warehouse over in the valley of all this early, just this they had, massive amount of Neve desks and all this early equipment. And one day they brought in this. It was the first plate reverb unit ever used, and they wanted to use it. But they were talking about how in those days, in the real early days, because they started off as the backing band for Little Richard, and then they became their own band, and they got into music production and all this stuff, and built Cherokee Studios, and did just from Cat Stevens through the Beach Boys, through to Paul McCartney, through to Michael Jackson. So many artists worked through Cherokee, but they were talking about how they'd experiment with reverb in the real early days just by putting a speaker in a hallway and a mic down the other end and trying to get these happening, and they were doing it real time. And I imagine here in Australia, because we were a bit disconnected, the experimentation, like you said, that happened with the amplifiers must have all been going on with like pedals and all those other technologies as well along the way.
I remember the first pedal I bought. Actually, I think on the Stones thing, it might have been Satisfaction.
I think you're right, sir. Yeah, that's it.
So I had an amplifier that was 60-watt amplifier that was like a piece of furniture that was made by Ace Radio in Marrickville.
Yeah. And
I bought a Burns Bison fuzz box. Right? Horrible. I wish I still had it though. It was built like a tank, right?
Yeah.
And it gave me, I never knew how to set the tones, but it gave me enough distortion to be able to play a Hendrix or Clapton type solo, and I couldn't do it with the clean sounds, like people like Ronnie Gould, who's very clever. But so I'd stop on this Burns Bison fuzz box, and it'd give me all this nice distortion. I could pull notes and hold notes with it and stuff without having too much. Yeah, again, the technology was slow, when the Wah-Wah pedal came out. Like, what a boon that was,
Yeah.
And Hendrix's rotor sound pedal, right? You see what those things are worth now?
No.
It's half a house,
What about the voice box, Brampton and the voice box and all that?
Yeah.
Are we too precious now? Like, we had that technology back then, which was pretty simple but worked so well. Has it got to the point where we're just too precious about sounds these days, do you think? Or?
I think we're very particular about sounds now.
But does it matter?
No, at the end of the day, to me, no. I go, what does this song need? So, again, I've stuck with pretty much the same equipment for quite a while now, so I know what sounds I can pull out of that, and I can pull those tones up pretty quickly if I need it in a sound. Or again, the pickup selector, or utilising the pickup selector, turning the gain down, cleans everything up, turning the gain up, give you a bit more crunch. I'm not a big tone hound anymore, because I've been using the same gear for so long, I know what it does.
Yeah. So, mate, you got the new EP coming out. What's been your journey of recording? What's been your most successful work?
Well, I've had 2 consecutive number ones on the Australian Blues and Roots charts.
Mm-hmm.
The last time that happened was about 2016, 2017. We've done an EP called 5 Lanes that was new, and then after that I did a retrospective album with all the stuff that I'd recorded 5 albums with before the web, so people hadn't heard a lot of those songs. So that album went gangbusters, mate. It was great. So it's been when, because I'm not overly prolific, some artists, mate, they can churn out an album a week, and they've got my home studio to do that. I've never done that. So I've always preferred to have an engineer over the back of the desk. So,
me too.
I don't want to have to worry about what he's getting out. I need to worry about what I'm getting out. And
And look, I know some people do get the home record, the self-recording right. Understand that, but me, I was always loved having that band around me and feeding off those band players, and then getting that through an engineer and getting that happening, where it was very much like you were actually they were sitting at a live audio desk and getting that live feel. That was what me, because I felt when I tried to do it by myself, I was always just putting too much of my own flavors repeatedly into the same thing instead of relying on what's coming in. Do you find that with the guys you work with?
But I used an engineer at Sydney, a guitar player by the name of Peter Northcote. He's genius, and he mastered this last one for us.
Mm-hmm.
But this time around, we used a young guy called George Mungle. George is all of 26 years old, a terrific live engineer. But I just wanted to give him a crack. He was keen to do the gig, so we gave him a crack at it at the studio, and he did a good job. It came up with a recording that sounds like the band. So that's, I'll have the songs written and reversed and everything done before I go into the studio. So we're not, because we're paid for the time. So we're not standing around going, what do we do next? We get like that EP was done and dusted in 2 days. After that, it was just mixing.
It's good to see you using the young bloke, but I think also too one of the things us older boys get wrong sometimes is we think that you got to have these years of experience to do what gets done, but we forget that Hendrix, the Stones, your James Taylors, your Jackson Browns, Neil Youngs, when they were writing the great stuff and producing it that we know so well today, they were all like 23, 24, 25 years old.
I know. You look at them and you go, I was so young. So again, they had reasonable budgets for their records after a while. I remember reading about Jackson Browne was allowed 5 flops before they even thought about being able to recoup what they'd advanced.
Yeah. Springsteen had the same thing. Springsteen's first 2 albums were brilliant albums, but they didn't sell. And they weren't going to release Born to Run unless he had a hit on it, and he ended up having such a massive hit on Born to Run. But they gave him those albums. It was 3 albums to really develop through to get to what he needed to get. And I agree with that. That's that pathway. But still, these dudes producing this stuff, the Beatles, in their early 20s, mid-20s, doing these things. And I think sometimes we need to, instead of thinking we're giving these young guys a chance, maybe we actually need to be clinging into their energy to actually bring their energy into the music we're making,
Well, they've got a tremendous knowledge of high tech. Now, these guys, So, I know Peter's kept up with it in Sydney. Other guys, I don't know, mate, how they went when they changed over from 2-inch tape over to a full digital studio.
Yeah.
But the young guys, mate, they're on it,
Absolutely. But mate, those songs you had that you were top of the blues charts, where do people get access to them?
Mate, off my Woods Express Facebook page.
Can you send me that link and I'll put it up, mate? I'll put that link up. So
and then there's hang on.
Oh, not now. When we finish, mate. When we finish,
good. There's got a Reverb Nation page with a lot of the earlier stuff on it, and we've just opened the Bandcamp page, and I'm still in the process of transferring over the catalogue, the back catalogue. So,
and is that where people will be able to find the new release as well?
Yeah, Bandcamp, Woods Express Bandcamp. There's no E in Express, so just go.
And what's the name of the new release?
It's Mayfair Street Blues.
Mayfair Street Blues. How many tracks are on that?
5. Just an EP.
EP. Excellent. And mate, you're going to be performing that live around the place, are you?
We hope so. I'll put in applications for all these festivals, mate. I'm not overly interested in doing small club gigs anymore. Bands beyond it, and they were a means to an end earlier this year. We did 5 nights with the Cigars. That was great. But I have been going, well, I ain't doing any more solo gigs. And with the band, I just want to do the festivals.
So mate, when you say that the Cigars, that Bondi Cigars, you do a lot of work with, of course, legendary Sydney outfit. What were you
Yep.
doing with them?
Oh, we just did the supports with them. They were up here for a week. Al Britton, their bass player, and he was a member of Wards Express for a long time. So,
Right.
yeah, when they were coming up, he asked your booking agent, mine, if the old man could come out and do the supports, which we were happy to do.
He got permission, did he?
Yeah.
Mate, it's been great to talk to you. Is there anything we haven't covered off on that you'd like to put out there to people? Let them know what you're doing.
Not really, Nick. I mean, what do you say? Like, I appreciate outlets like yours that let me come on and have a yak. Just for me, it's always the young guys. And I go, you don't have the opportunity we used to have.
No, exactly.
If you hang in, maybe, just maybe, you might be able to create a scene around yourself.
Well, music's never going to go away, and people actually listen to more music than ever before. The model keeps changing, and in recent times we've had a major model shift where it's gone from physical product to streaming product, and venues have changed and everything else. But people are still listening to music, and there's a whole generation now that really hasn't experienced live music. They haven't experienced having that product, and
Sure.
I think there's going to be a way that will somehow come back around because the market will demand it eventually. Now, every time. Yeah, we look back and we say, it was so much easier in the 70s or 80s, whatever. But no, if you weren't signed with Mushroom or signed with a few particular labels around the place, you were pushing the barrow up the hill all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Hard.
Studio time was like $900 an hour at one stage. If you weren't signed, you couldn't record.
But we, and at the same time, yes, people like myself could make a great living through the 80s and 90s from my live performances. But like you say, when I wanted to do my album, I had to be at 10, 20K scenario to get my album done.
That's right.
Now it's harder to get gigs going, but it is much easier to record your product. So there's swings and wheels going around all the time. Music's not going away. And like you said, if you're brave enough to get out there, and one of the big things I say to people is, if you want to be a musician, what do you do? And I say, we don't have plan B. Because if you've got plan B, you're going to fall on plan B because plan A is really hard.
Absolutely.
Now, you get to times to your life where you may say, well, I don't really want to be going after plan A. I want to do something different, but I still have my passion, whatever else. But if you're serious about music is your thing, don't have your fallback because it's going to be too hard. And that's what I say. But there will be a way that the industry will go around in circles. It'll be hard. I said this recently, maybe too many times, but I saw an article when they were talking about when records first came out and they were like cylinders, and they did the wind up thing. And there were articles coming out in the papers saying that, well, live music is dead now because people will just listen to their music in homes. They won't get to hear it. The argument's been the same all the way through. It's like with AI, is AI going to destroy songwriters? Well, it's another competitor, but there's always been 100,000 other competitors.
Sure.
And it's people want to get on there and make money through AI. It doesn't mean I still can't sit down and try and write a great song.
That's right. That's right.
Me, it's another competitor, but it doesn't stop me. I'm excited about where music can go to, but I think it's so important to tap back into the things that people like yourself have gone through and experienced, and the music you're still putting out and the things you've got to say to people. So, mate, I hope we've covered off on stuff, but I've just loved this time sitting down chatting to you because I respect so much what you do and have done. And mate, we'll edit this up and hopefully we can get a few little social media bites out there to help promote the new EP.
Good on you, mate. Let me know when it's going up and I'll alert my follower.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Ross Ward. Thank you.
Talk to you soon, mate.